Welcome to the Economy Magazine at I-24 News, where we take a look at the world markets and the global economy. I'm Natalie Ehrlich. Well, coming up today, despite the shadow of cheap oil, Libya makes progress on the political front. We assess the health of the North African nation's economy. And Egypt, better known for political turmoil than startups and innovation. But Cairo apparently also laying claim now to a part of the global high-tech scene. Let's start now with the headlines. Asian markets mostly in the red Tuesday. Japan's Nikkei dropped 1.68%. The Hang Seng dipped 0.17%. And the Shanghai fell 0.28%. European equities, on the other hand, traded to the upside. By the afternoon, London's FTSE jumped almost 2%. Germany's DAX rose 2.4%, and France's CAC rallied 2.5%. U.S. markets also signaled a positive open. Well, the EU foreign minister signaled there may be a need now to extend sanctions against Russia. The EU foreign policy chief, Federica Mogherini, told reporters that Italy last week unexpectedly demanded sanctions be delayed and discussed further within the EU bloc. In addition to Italy, other EU nations like Cyprus and Hungary have warmer ties with Moscow. Still, the Eastern nations want several more years of sanctions, underscoring the deep divide within the European bloc on that issue.
Ministers that expressed their views today, which were many of them, I would say probably all, were indicating the fact that indeed we are going in the right direction on the Minsk agreement implementation, but still far from having a full implementation, and so an indication of the need to roll over the sanctions for a further period of time.
In a bid to breathe new life into Argentina's economy, new President Mauricio Macri eliminated a string of taxes on agriculture and industrial exports. Macri's inauguration Thursday ended more than a decade of left-wing rule. Well, the export tax cuts are the first of the economic reforms promised by Macri, who has vowed to overhaul Kirchner's legacy of hands-on economic management, including protectionist import controls, heavy taxes on ag exports, and an official exchange rate.
In the farming sector, we need to reward those who are motivated by the challenge of exporting, investing, and innovating. This is why, from today, there will no longer be taxes on industrial exports in Argentina, because such taxes are not appropriate.
The United Nations said it needs $3.2 billion to help Syrians in need across the war-torn country. UNAID Chief Stephen O'Brien made this announcement in Damascus during a three-day visit to Syria. During his press conference, he also disputed claims of politicization, insisting that the UN's assistance is solely humanitarian in nature. Well, more than 250,000 Syrians have been killed and some 10 million have fled their homes during the 4 years of conflict.
The amount that's just been announced is $3.2 billion. And that is to seek to address the needs of 13.5 million people here in Syria. And of course, those needs are spread across the various types of need that are required in order to support life, to give people the chance to be protected.
The Shroom Committee on Monday announced a plan to increase competition in the Israeli credit market. The committee's recommendations were met with mixed reactions, as Israel's finance minister Moshe Kahlon signaled that he wanted the reforms to go even further. The plan under consideration now would require Israel's two largest banks, Hapoalim and Leumi, to sell off their credit card units, also creating an easier regulatory framework for non-bank credit providers. Still, the Bank of Israel has cautioned against the effects of too much competition, saying that it could cause instability. Well, now for some perspective on the world markets, we are joined by Andy Bush, who is based in Chicago. He is there, a financial expert. Thank you very much for being with us.
It's always a pleasure.
Well, we are expecting the Fed is meeting this week. Tell us, what can we expect?
Yeah, the Fed's going to meet this week, and they've pretty much told everybody now for some time that they're going to raise interest rates. And the markets are expecting a 25 basis point rate hike with the expectations at pretty much 100%. The recent economic data has been really pretty consistently positive with a few misses, but the central bank needs to move off the zero interest rate bound. You know, there's distinct indications of inflation pressures building in wages in several sectors of the economy, home building, restaurants, whatever. And the U.S. dollar has recently given up some of its gains due to the ECB disappointment. So the Fed has every reason to raise interest rates this week and really more into 2016. I mean, even Congress has taken away the serious risks out there for the Fed by acting on the debt ceiling in the budget. So it's full steam ahead. 25 basis points this week.
All right. Well, what other language can we expect to see out of the Fed during their meeting?
Yeah, this is a key point of this focus of this Fed meeting is not necessarily the rate hike, but really the language that they're going to talk about future rate hikes. That's what the market's looking at. And over the last 6 weeks, the market's been hearing really 2 points from the Fed. One, that they'll likely raise rates in December, but two, that the pace will be gradual and moderate and really data dependent. Yet, I emphasize this so importantly, the Fed has no idea whether this will be true or not, and they really won't be able to quantify the pace of the rate hikes that are coming in 2016 for the markets, as it's quite subjective. So what's compelling about this is the market's anticipating 3 rate hikes in 2016, but the Fed predictions, their dot plots, are indicating 5 rate hikes. And given the current building wage pressures and a scenario where oil prices stabilize, the central bank is going to be looking at both headline and core inflation moving up beyond its 2% target. So the real question moving forward, and this is fun to watch, is this. When will the market begin to price in or build in the additional 2 to 3 rate hikes that the Fed has predicted for 2016?
Fascinating. Well, you will be watching that certainly for us. Thank you very much for being with us as always. Moving on now, despite a huge slump in oil, Libya has managed to make political progress, and Daniel Roth has the story.
This week, the U.S. Secretary of State, the EU's lead diplomat, and the Italian foreign minister were all gathered in Rome to support the unification of Libya's 2 rival parliaments, which recently came to an agreement on a national unity government. Since June 2014, the elected House was not recognized by the former Islamic-led parliament, but now that's changing.
Abbiamo concordato all'unanimità.
We have agreed unanimously to support the new government that will be born thanks to the agreement between Libyans. It will be supported through the United Nations, but also through economic and any other kind of support to help the future process of stabilization in Libya.
After the fall of Muammar Gaddafi in 2011, Libya managed to push forward economically despite brutal violence. Growth has exceeded 10%, and GDP per capita is the highest in the African continent. But the country's success is based on oil, an unstable commodity these days. And still, the 2 governments clashed over the resource, with Islamic State fighters, between 2,000 and 3,000 of them, entering the fray to look for access to oil revenue as well.
We cannot allow the status quo in Libya to continue. It is dangerous for the viability of Libya. It is dangerous for Libyans. And now, because of the increased presence of Daesh purposefully migrating there, it is dangerous for everyone.
Over 5 years, oil production has dropped 400% and today sits below 400,000 barrels. The result has been that the public deficit has exploded. In 2014, reaching over $16 billion, or 44% of Libya's GDP.
Rise Up, a conference for high-tech startups, took place in Cairo over the weekend, and here's that story from Daniel Roth.
In recent years, Egypt has been known more for its political turmoil than its startup scene, but the country is staking a claim in the innovative world of high-tech. And over the weekend, the 2-day Rise Up Summit in Cairo sought to do just that, assuming the mantle of top entrepreneurship gathering in the Middle East and Africa.
Rise Up is the first summit that invites entrepreneurs and owners of small businesses that are innovative and technologically driven to get in touch with investors, supporters, charity organizations, government entities, or anyone who can present them with services that will help start or grow their businesses.
And people came. 4,000 people from tens of countries were in attendance at this 3rd annual event, making connections, pitching ideas, and developing business. And though the hype surrounding Egypt's tech scene is growing, there's still room to grow more.
I think that there's a ton of business opportunity here. I think in general it's been undercapitalized. In other geographies around the world where we see similar size markets and audiences, there's usually quite a bit more capital at work. So we're optimistic there's going to be more folks jumping into the market, but certainly we're happy and greedy to be jumping in now.
The vision surrounding this event and the growing taste for innovative tech and entrepreneurship is, many hope, something that will lead to a stronger overall economic reality for Egypt.
We're trying to create a supplemental pillar of the Egyptian economy, to be an additional pillar from manufacturing and tourism and the foreign remittances, all the major components of the Egyptian economy. And so we think that startups, and specifically tech startups, can be a major part of the economy going forward.
And the conference seems poised to be a breeding ground for partnerships and ideas. In a country looking to encourage stable economic growth in the 21st century, projects focused on encouraging and investing in startups is one key to success.
And now for the stories we didn't want you to miss, we are joined by Daniel Roth for Media Watch. So thank you for being with us as always. Let's expand on that Egypt story first.
Yeah, it's worth expanding on. We talk here in our magazine a lot about Israel, the startup nation. We look at all the investment coming from China, from Europe. We don't stop to look right next door in Egypt, and particularly post-revolution Egypt, post-2011 Egypt. There's been this kind of excitement, this fervor surrounding startups, and really the potential that has for, as we saw in the video report, kind of a new leg of this struggling economy. So it's particularly interesting because it's right next to Israel. It's if I may say, it's kind of a baby brother in terms of size right now. We saw recently an acquisition of Fowry, a digital payment system, $100 million. So if you compare that, which was a huge piece of news in Egypt, to the Waze purchase a couple of years ago here of $1 billion, you see it's a little smaller.
All right. Well, but $100 million is still pretty sizable.
$100 million, I would take it, certainly.
By our standards, at least.
It's really interesting to see these kind of two trends. One of them is this kind of excitement that I mentioned, post-revolution opportunities, despite the instability. And that's the other movement happening in Egypt, is that actually there's growing instability. Tourism is on and off year by year. Unemployment is actually growing big time. 2010, it was 9%. Now it's sitting around 13%. So it's not insignificant. So something like this, like the Rise Up conference, which, by the way, is huge, the thousands of people there, it's a big deal.
And it has a good name.
It has a great name, and it's, of course, inspired by sort of the revolutionary spirit there. No matter what you think about the political situation today, there is this spirit on the street, and you see it in everything from the political activism to the startup entrepreneurship scene.
All right, so what else did you bring?
Well, so this is closer to my heart, of course.
And my hometown.
And your hometown, yes. Star Wars is coming out, and I will be among the first in the world to see it tomorrow night at midnight. I will be there waiting in line. But actually, the story is Disney bought Lucasfilm for $4 billion in 2012, and people wondered if it was a good deal. They had bought Marvel before that for about the same price, 3 years before that, Pixar for more than double that some years before that, and people wondered, so is Lucasfilm going to pay off? Now, when they bought Lucasfilm, they bought Star Wars, they bought Indiana Jones. Star Wars alone, though, you're seeing billions and billions of dollars. It's a laughable question when you look back at it.
This is more than just the movie here. They have access to all the other brands.
This is toys, which Force Friday, which was this big event in early September, was a big toy bonanza. For the 3 months between September and the end of the year, they're expecting $2 billion in toy revenue.
Just the
toy revenue. So another factor, you look at pre-sales tickets for the opening weekend, $50 million already sold just in the U.S. Now, when you compare that to Jurassic World, which took in $209 million just in the U.S. in terms of box office opening weekend, and you see that they've already sold $50 million, you're looking at what could be $2 billion in box office sales when all is said and done.
So at the end of the day, could George Lucas here be thinking, wow, that was a bad deal?
Well, see, this is the thing. George Lucas was sitting on this. He wasn't going to make any new films. He, I believe, was very discouraged by the reception of the 3 more recent films, the prequels as they're known, and he wasn't going to make them. And actually, you saw the brand start to dwindle. The toy sales were down. Comic book sales were down. Everything was down. But when the excitement about this film came out, Comic book sales jumped up 25 times. Toy sales, as you just said, billions of dollars. We're already seeing the billions roll in.
So is this Disney?
This is Disney. Disney picked this up, and Disney knows what they're doing. For them, it was a small chunk of change, not a large chunk of change. For George Lucas, it's of course big. He took home $4 billion for his company, and Disney picked this up along with a number of other properties. And they've always been a behemoth in the media scene. Now they're just a little bit bigger, and that's what we're seeing.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being with us, Daniel Roth, our reporter who brings us all these wonderful stories, whether it's in Libya, Egypt, and now George Lucas and Star Wars. Thank you very much for being with us today, and join us again tomorrow for all your global economic news from the Jaffa Port in Tel Aviv. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Natalie Ehrlich.